Thank you. Hope you can hear me. There's much to talk, if only 15 minutes were not so fleeting. The organizers of this conference, Climate Justice for Happiness, have dispensed limited justice to me while inviting me to talk. But I thank you for extension of 5 minutes. I have titled my talk, Happiness Between Heat and Rain. You can see what I'm talking about, temperature and rainfall, etc. Alluding to this climate change events and also broader human experiences of happiness. Analyzing the last 30 years of primary meteorological data alongside GNH data of 2010, 2015, and 2022 allows us to check certain trends. I only briefly answer 2 questions which are up there. Is there climate change in Bhutan? And what is its implication on GNH? Obviously, time is not enough. These are the meteorological stations in Bhutan. There are 20 of them. But I'm afraid that the local dynamics among some of these geodetic stations might be a bit messy because they interfere with local environment. Here you see in Sanjigang geodetic stations, and for some subconscious reason, the meteorological department also, instead of saying, please remove these prayer flags, have said that, please refrain from prayer flags on this fence. How exactly the wind speed is going to be measured when it is surrounded by these prayer flags is a bit amusing to me. But also I found that pine trees are growing rapidly around this kind of centers, casting long shadows and interfering with record of temperature. And in the instance of Semtokha weather station, I have great doubt about its data accuracy. But otherwise, the 20 stations generate about, in the last 30 years, 7,300 data points, and that cannot be easily dismissed. A common sense way of checking is, I must time myself, by the way. I must time myself. Checking is, of course, diurnal temperature across space of 20 stations and across time of 30 years. Diurnal temperature is just a simple difference between maximum and minimum daily temperature, as you know. And there is no reference value. Hence, it is called absolute temperature, which you know very well. You can see that absolute mean temperature slope is going up slightly in the last 30 years. But there is a sharper fall in the linear trend of minimum absolute temperature, leading on balance to a gentle upward diurnal temperature range, which is daily maximum temperature minus daily minimum temperature. And the range is increasing, daily range is increasing because of the widening gap between the maximum and minimum in the country. Tracking change over many stations over 30 years becomes more accurate if we establish a baseline or reference value for temperature, or for that matter, rainfall. The method is simple and is sketched here. And when we estimate, what we get is that reference value becomes 22.074 degrees Celsius for maximum and 12.284 degrees Celsius for minimum. Having calculated this reference point, you can now see the gyration or deviation from this mean for each year. Maximum temperature and minimum temperature. These are known now as anomalies amongst climate studies scientists. But numbers like this are very difficult for the mind to grasp. So this slide portrays the minimum maximum temperature anomaly for the last 30 years. And the trend line for anomaly, you can see R square 0.40, means that the trend line cannot explain 60% of this slope due to random variance from other factors. You can also see that the annual mean temperature anomaly for the last 30 years, computed from the record of 20 weather stations, has a sharper downward trend, exactly like the minimum absolute temperature trend. But I think I'll come to that later. I can't find it. But for Kangloong, similar downward sloping subsoil temperature, here you can see, this is for Kangloong, has a sharper downward trend sloping subsoil temperature, downward linear trend is noticed for the last 30 years. However, in west, such as Wangdi Photang, this type of subsoil temperature is not pronounced. Wangchu River flow is recorded daily, Chukha, because it turns turbines in Chukha and Tala. The volume of the river, measured in cubic meter per second, enlarges in descending order from summer, autumn to spring, and its volume changes in cycles from 3 to 5 years. The flow is absolutely flat in the winter, across all time. But for other seasons, the fluctuation may have to do with the changes in the pattern of rainfall. I made this graph to show that, like many statistics in Bhutan, we continue to make errors by using simple averages, where one should use, for example, in the cubic meter per second, harmonic mean, which is much lower than either geometric mean or average. These kind of mistakes are made throughout the government. Overall, the trend line for Chukha flow diminishes slightly, while Kurichu volume swelled from 1992 to 2020 and then fell. But this sort of nonlinear graph is possible only if you use Loess regression. It's not possible if you just do simple straight trend line. Even for Chuka, randomness is high during summer. This is calculated by coefficient of variation of water flow. During summer, it is randomness is high compared to other seasons, as indicated by very high coefficient of variation numbers. Summers are therefore very risky and unpredictable for Chuka and Tala. Over the last 30 years, June rainfall before I come to rainfall, this is the rainfall pattern for the last 30 years for Ha and Paro. Ha and Paro. Paro is this purple line and green is the Ha. I was quite surprised that rainfall is higher in Ha than compared to Paro. This is for the whole country, which is very messy, sorry. But I wanted to say that over the last 30 years, June rainfall shows a slightly downward linear trend here, this one. In contrast, September experiences slightly more wetness. Here, the trend line is going up, September 1. This is September for all last 30 years. Now it is rainfall by districts, unless there is some defect in the instruments in Dagana. Amongst districts, Dagana is getting drier and drier, has been getting drier for the last 30 years. While Phinsoling's rainfall pattern and level is going through huge unpredictable cycles of ups and downs. This observation will apply not only to Phinsoling, but by extrapolation, in my mind, to the whole border towns along Indo-Bhutan areas. This experience is also borne by the people of those areas in terms of incidences of hailstorms. Now, there is only one exception, unless the record is wrong. The only place where precipitation is going up consistently over time is Gasa district. We have to do more work to confirm this kind of phenomena. But overall, the linear trend shows that for the country as a whole, the linear trend is flat. It's not going up, going down. I'm looking for one chart. No, it's not here. So, this is the proportion of households who complained about windstorm in the past 12 years. And as I said, hailstorm is experienced more in these darker regions. this information is coming from, not from weather stations, but from perceptual responses of GNH survey. You can also see from this perceptual map that heavy or heavy or lack of rainfall in the past 12 months, and the proportion of households who complained about hailstorm in the past 12 months, slightly different. But 67% of farmers say there is either too much rain or too little rain for farming, depending on locations. This is 66% of the farmers now saying that rainfall is not coming at the right time or in the right volume. But rest of the people whose occupation is not farming is not bothered about this. You can see far little complaint. And I think civil servants are not responsive enough to these changes in coming up with programs and measures. In general, how am I doing with time? 5 minutes, good. I'll wind up. Central Bhutan, here, and Mangdi and Chamkharchu valleys are less affected compared to Kurichu Valley and Western Bhutan. I'm sure students here know that because of the Shillong Plateau, the rainfall pattern between East and West Bhutan, although the Bhutan is small, is different. With traffic, mining, and industrial pollution, you can see that the Phinsoling, Tading, Daga, Mewang, Chang, and Deutang Geoks have now become worthy of measures to control pollution, which is one of the key factors in early death and morbidity among human beings. There is as yet no awareness of how to approach this problem, either from the Ministry of Health or from Environmental Secretariat. Health of people in these geoks might be already severely affected. Research we carried out on many life stories confirm that in places like Pasakha, residents are bitterly complaining about health problem because of pollution. And these are also roughly the same areas where noise pollutions have become concerning, because noise, traffic, air pollutions are all related. They arise from the same sources. Obviously, farmers depend on rainfall, and as an occupational group, majority of them have become concerned. And I might say that with the shrinking of acreage and departure of young people from farming, this sector is facing critical problem that the government should address with renewed seriousness. if the country doesn't change transport and industries, there is a serious chance that we will sink in 2030 under business as usual scenario here. This is the emission from transport, and this is from industries. This work carried out by very concerned people in Japan, not in Bhutan, and it is a thorough piece of work. We have yet to reach such standards. But even then, by 2050, our emissions will sink. The comforting thing, from my point of view, is the Japanese scientific group erred in alliance with the NSB on one matter. That is that they assumed population of Bhutan will be 1 million by then. In my estimate, we will stabilize far earlier, much below 1 million. Probably we will stabilize at around 8 lakhs 30. I have proven right in the last 10 years. Their projections were wrong. I predicted already, but that is another matter. These are the areas where we should address our mitigation measures according to the Japanese scientist. This is under business as usual. By 2030, emission and sink capacity will become equalized. Now, income. Income level at the moment is positively correlated with quintile score. A quintile score is one of the simple measures for satisfaction with life and is used widely in West, not so much in our country. Our GNH measure is far more complex and cumbersome compared to quintile ladder, which is based on one single question of how do you rate your life, 0 to 10. Yet when we do joint distribution, you find that people in Bhutan find life satisfied if they have income of about 4 lakhs or about 5,000 USD. If it is 2,362 USD per year, people say they suffer subjectively or objectively or both. But we can achieve greater happiness outcome through not necessarily increasing income, but by redistribution or distribution. And in that regard, we should aim for income and wealth democracy rather than electoral democracy, which is coming up very soon. If you see this chart, 25% of the people own around 58 to 66% of the income, which leaves a great deal of work to be done. Our projects and programs need to be evaluated according to GNH, method of project evaluation, which we carried out for Japanese horticulture project in eastern Bhutan. And it can reveal that we should pay also equal attention to non-monetary sources of welfare than money. And here you can see the difference between control and non-control group in the project. Winding up, one pillar of non-monetary welfare and happiness is social and community care, reciprocity and support, which doesn't involve money. People's enjoyment of life depend on that. It is one kind of commons which we must preserve. Another thing, mental stress and mental health in our research has proven to be an unmistakable cause of the number of healthy days you enjoy per month. More mental stress and mental health problem you have, obviously, the lesser number of healthy days per month you can count. Subjective well-being scholars using quintile ladder score put a great deal of stress on this single question. But for GNH, this is my wrapping up, it is one among numerous 135 variables in the computation of GNH index. GNH index is correlated to quintile ladder, household income, mental health, and healthy days, as well as pollution of noise, air, water, and so on and so forth. GNH index for the country as a whole is improving, but at a slow pace. Central to the measurement is the ethical notion of sufficiency, because a person attending sufficiency in something or not impacts the index, but not those who cross the sufficiency level. Thus, distributive justice in experience and in goods and services are central. Experience in GNH is not all or nothing. There is gradient. Lastly, this is how GNH domains have changed over the last 12 years. In some, there have been positive changes with respect to income, delivery of services, literacy, education, ecology, disability reduction, and positive emotion. But there has also been negative changes in health, spirituality, artisan skills, safety, family relationship, and strangely government performance, perception. Although delivery of services has improved, perception of government functioning has decreased. That may have to do with the notion of ambitious, unfulfilled pledges of the government. And psychological well-being also has deteriorated. I thank you, and I dedicate this humble presentation, digging into meteorological data of Bhutan for the first time for myself, to His Majesty's birthday, during which this important conference is being held. May JSW pioneer legal standpoint towards normativity of happiness, which Her Royal Highness declared a few years ago. I hope there is practical progress at this institutional level. Thank you very much.